think the reason that this addiction is such a challenge, but also such a blessing, is it's really not as much about the sex as much as it's about, I want to be with somebody who's committed to reality. And I think that is why this recovery process is so big. Is it's not just stopping the behavior. What she gets concerned with is the double life, the gaslighting, the deception, how easy it was for you. That's the scary part. Debby, what is that aha moment, that connecting of the dots that makes recovery and sobriety that much easier?
I'm going to have to change your wording a little bit because I don't know if it makes it that much easier. I don't know that I know too many things about recovery that are easy.
Yeah.
But I think it requires when the person finally gets to that moment of surrender. And I think it's probably the hardest part of the journey is getting there. But once somebody gets there, then the rest of it begins to make sense.
Before we dive into that, can you tell us why it's so hard for high achievers to surrender?
Well, because it goes against everything that we think of. I mean, part of higher achievers, we want power, we want affirmation. We really don't want to be questioned. We don't want accountability. I mean, after all, we've got the ideas, right? We can do it better than anybody else. So why would I have to surrender? I mean, you're asking me to do the very thing that would keep me from being the success that I am, right? So it goes against the grain. I think we think of surrender along with vulnerability, vulnerability being something of being weak, instead of how much courage and strength it really takes for surrender and vulnerability.
So sell me on that, because when I hear it to this day, and Debby, I've done a ton of work and I've hired a lot of beautiful people like yourself to help me. So I get it now, but I'll got to be completely honest with you. It was not that long ago where that word, I wasn't sold on that word. What I did was I put surrender in my recovery identity. And so when I was recovering, it's like, okay, I'll surrender there, but I'm not going to do it anywhere else. Well, the problem is, guess when our addiction happens? Everywhere else. And so sell me on that. How, if I'm a high achiever and that word just doesn't sound like something that's going to be beneficial to me in my life, help me reframe it so I can kind of get on your team there. Because I do agree with you, Debby. That is, and I think most of the listeners listening to this, I think they do understand that surrendering and just kind of dropping the act and is the key. But I think it's kind of the enemy. Can you help us reframe it so we can get on your team here?
Sure. And I think you can go with this analogy. If you take physical therapy, I mean, when we are having to go through recovery physically, we have to surrender our power to the process. I think we know better, but we have to surrender to the process of doing what's hard. We have to surrender to the fact that somebody is there guiding me, helping me do the things, that pushing through where it's hard that I don't want to. And we have to surrender to the trust of that. We also have to give up our own power, really more to empowerment of what I'm empowered to do within this. If I've surrendered my power, my knowledge that I know best and that I do this. And then we have to surrender to the fact that recovery is never just always going up and up and better. We have to surrender to the fact that we gain ground, and then we may relapse or slip, and then we gain ground and relapse. Then we have to look at, why did I relapse or slip? What am I not surrendering? What do I keep going back to?
What you're talking about is, I call it the recovery spectrum. And so at any given moment, you're parked, at least the way that I define it, you're parked at wherever you are on the spectrum. And so let's say, unhealthy is 0. That would be completely addict minded. Healthy would be the sober mind, 100% sober minded. We know we're never 100% addict minded, and we know we're never 100% sober minded, anybody. So let's say I would say early on in recovery, you're parked at let's call it 32%. So you're definitely on the addict side of things. And what we know about the addicts, they think about themselves and immediate gratification before they think about consequences in the bigger picture. Whereas the person on the, up in the high 80s, 90s on the sober side of the recovery spectrum, their sober mind is very, very loud. There's a lot of, the first three thoughts are consequences, what this would mean for others. Is this a sustainable practice? If I kept doing this, and if everybody kept doing this, what would the world be like? And those voices are so much louder, and there's so many of them that when they're faced with this decision, they will choose sobriety over the other two. And so I think you brought up earlier, I know that's not the direction that we wanted to go, but I wanted to park there just to help everybody listening and understand. And this is hard for the partners too, because I think everybody wants the light switch to be flipped. Okay, addict off. But to your point, it's a lot of the times we don't know what we need to change until the pain is there. And unfortunately, with this particular addiction, that's a rough moment, right? If you slip up and have a couple sips of the beer, and then you go, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And you throw it away and you leave and you get in your car and you drive home. You tell your wife, gosh, I went to the bar, ordered a beer. I even took a couple sips. She might say, well, I'm really proud of you for leaving. Yeah, that ain't going to happen with this, a couple sips. That's not going to be granted with open arms and support. And if you have that, good for you, you're lucky, but that's not the case. So turning that back now into surrender, what's that mean then? So what you're saying essentially is giving, because I'm trying to clarify this up, because I know this is a sticky concept for a lot of people. Are you saying that there's grace involved? Because I know you were saying there's kind of 5 aspects to surrender, which I'm excited to hear those 5. But yeah, when we're talking about this, are we talking about grace here? Is that surrender? What's going on? How can we wrap our head around this concept of continuing to screw up, being okay with screwing up, but also not being okay with screwing up?
Right, right. Well, I do believe that grace has to be involved in this in all areas. And hopefully for those who are in a relationship, that their significant other is trying to practice grace too. And grace does not mean permission to keep doing what you're doing, or it just means I'm going to have to give you grace. I'm going to have to keep giving you maybe something that you don't deserve yet. I'm willing to give forgiveness and be on this journey with you. But when we talk about surrender and these things that you just brought up, I think the first thing that we have to surrender to is that you don't ever get to the point of being able to do recovery alone. And even if you get into that 80% and you're, like feeling good, I mean, temptations are even way out here. But just being committed to doing recovery in life, always in community of other men recovering, because once we're alone, we get into our own thoughts. That addict think gets so big. We start listening to ourselves. We're not listening to anybody else. And we get back into that grandiose way of thinking, and we forget consequences and all of that. So if I could say just the number one thing when we surrender to the process of this journey, it's I'm surrendering that I cannot ever do this alone, ever. And I know you've probably heard every CSAT has probably said, it's 3 to 5 years before you get to healthy stabilization. And I couldn't count the number of both men addicts and women addicts that end up back in my office at the end of year 5.
Right.
And then that's where the relapse and slip. And then we go back to, well, I was kind of thinking after year 5, I didn't need to do anything else. I didn't need accountability anymore. I wouldn't be here. And so it may be 3 to 5 years you feel in healthy functioning, but you've always got to stay in a community of like-minded men to help.
Here's the thing too, I want to say to that, and I'd love to hear your response. You can, for everybody listening, you can go to meetings and groups and still not connect. Because that's I think a lot of people listening to this will say, oh yeah, I have I've been to my intensive, and oh yeah, I still am getting on the calls with the guys from the intensive, and oh no, I'm going to 12 step too. But I think the you can very, very much go and with the mentality of I'm going to do this and I'm checking off the box versus showing up and really with and this is kind of where the reason I'm bringing this up is this is I embarrassingly, that was how I went to groups and meetings in the beginning. I went to check off the box, but if I'm completely honest with you, Debbie, I still went with the mentality of, oh yeah, I'm gonna recover faster than these guys, or oh well, I don't know, step 4 is kind of stupid. I think I'm gonna not really pay attention to this topic today. It's I very much went with the unsurrendered version of me, which was I'm here to do the thing, but I'm still special. I'm still better. I'm going to get this out of my life. I don't know why these guys are still coming here after 8 years. I'm going to get this whole thing out of the way in a year and a half, and then I won't come back. And I just want to bring all that up because I think there's probably are a lot of people listening who believe, oh yeah, Debbie, I'm connecting, I'm doing the thing with other addicts. I just want to put that on the radar. Are you though? Because I think if you because that's that's where surrender is so key still, in addition to connection, because you can come to, I do interviews to get into my group, and I would say 9 times out of 10, I don't invite them into the group. And it's because they're just not in a place where they're going to come and connect. And so they're going to be the one of the 10 guys who's coming and expecting to be fixed or whatever. And there's a big difference between, hey, I get that I don't know everything and I'm open to other ways of looking at things. And if you don't come to a group with that mentality, that even someone who has a quarter of the income that you make or a tenth of the income that you make, and is divorced and maybe did progress his addiction to the point where he did things with that resulted in a felony, you have to understand he still might know something about something that you don't, that could be the thing that changed. I know a lot of people look at that guy and they say, oh, he smells like cigarettes, he's drinking Folgers, he's not my kind of guy. And I get why you would say that, because I said that about that guy too. But I'll tell you what, I have heard people like that say something that I never considered that made all the difference. And I call that surrendering, the concept that maybe somebody in here knows the thing that I'm looking for.
Right, that I may not be the smartest one in the room, and there's
Mhm.
something I could gain, yeah, that these and I think that surrendering in that connection, you talk about connection, but it's surrendering to authentic accountability too. Accountability is not just, "Hey, how you doing, bro? Good. Yeah, oh, yeah, I got this," "Oh, yeah, I'm not struggling much this week." No, it's asking those hard questions and really being willing to be accountable to being honest, so that the other piece in that is I think we have to surrender to no longer being deceptive.
Mhm.
And it addiction can exist if we rule out deception.
Mhm.
And if it's like I have to surrender that, I can't be willing to still be deceptive. As long as I'm willing to be deceptive, I'm still willing to act out.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and that accountability helps keep me from being deceptive. I'll give this just kind of personal. I like jewelry and clothes, and gosh, life would be so much easier if I didn't. But a time in life that could kind of get overwhelming, that I just, oh my gosh. And so I had an accountability partner. I was like, these are the names of these boutiques that I really cannot go in unless I call you. And I will be accountable for that. And you ask me. And I was out one day, and guess what? I discovered a new boutique. And guess what my first thought was? It's not on the list.
Oh, wow. There's a lot of listeners right now thinking about that. Oh, I just discovered this app has this section. And that's not acting out. I
Not a
mean, this
game of
app's not even
circle.
for that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I had to make that decision right then and there. Do I go with that? That it's not on the list so I can go
Mhm.
in? Or do I immediately text or call my accountability partner and go, here's another boutique that's got to go on the
Mm.
list. I'm
Mhm.
standing in front, and walk me off the ledge that I'm not going to go in. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I mean, so we can all go there, but we really have to go. How are we going to do accountability?
Yes.
Are we really going to surrender to the process of what that requires of us to show up with accountability?
Mhm. And
I
that's,
did.
I
I
think,
did call her.
yeah, and I think and you, and yeah, hey, keep me from going this. Here's the one. Here's the address. Here's the name. Don't let me go. um, I think I think to me, I don't like the term sex addiction, because to me, it does a disservice to the greater term, which is process addiction, which shopping is one of those. Shopping, eating, eating disorders of all kinds. So people, I think I like to use the term process addiction. Yes, does sex and sexual acting out fall into some of that, and objectification of women? Sure, but I would say a lot of successful men, their number one process addiction is money and attention and career success, and so I like to have them wrap their head around the idea that everyone,
Yeah.
and that's why I think I like to drop the sex addiction term and actually just substitute it out for process addiction, because now you're in good company. There's
Right.
actually a tons of people who have latched on to a brain process. Ooh, as long as I have this new dress to wear to this thing, I'm a somebody, and that's a process addiction. I like this mental process, and I like doing this, and I like the routine. I want an hour and a half to get ready before I go to the event, because if I have an hour and a half, then I'm going to be looking really, really good. And we engage in these mental processes, and the result is a good feeling. Whatever neurotransmitters are involved in that particular feeling, and one could become addicted to it in theory. And so I like to look at that. And the reason I bring this up is, um, to me, where I see surrender occur in our groups is when they start to realize the bigger picture, which is, oh my gosh, I actually play, and this is high achievers, not all of them, they have played life for the dopamine hit
Yeah.
of the brain process rather than living in it. And I think a lot of high achievers would resonate with this, because it's like, how many times have you done something that actually didn't bring you joy? And a lot of them have, over and over and over. It's like, oh, I quit. They really love this sport, but it's too feminine, so they quit it. Oh, I really love this instrument, but everybody in all the cool kids didn't play instruments, so I quit. But it's, those are like the childish ones. But I mean, it keeps going on.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, even though I'm like actually pretty satisfied with my income right now, I'm gonna go dive into this new venture and torment myself and put myself into all this stress, when I'm actually like pretty good. But because all the guys are doing this and they have more and they want more, then I must want more. And so I bring all this up because I think these are, at least in my population of high achieving men, I think this is the biggest, in my opinion, the biggest barrier to surrender, which is, I don't think they realize that that's not living, that is, yes, it's not sexual acting out, but choosing to live in fantasy, which that is. If I have this, then I'll be this, and if I go do that, then I'll become that, and if I can, I won't cheat, but I'll look the part, and then all the married women, I'll make sure that they want me, but then I'm not going to act on it. All these bizarre things are part of this process addiction, and it sucks you out of reality and
Right.
into a world full of brain processes that make you the man you want to be. And I think that, at least in my opinion, that was the thing that blocked me. It was like, Debbie, you're trying to take away my life, was what it felt like. But
Sure.
then where I started to surrender it was like, no, my therapists are trying to give me back my life and get me out of this. But I will tell you this, I went through withdrawal symptoms
Sure.
of being awesome. I loved my brain processes because they made me superior. They made me smart. They made me financially smarter and better than others. And I was very addicted to them. And so this
Yeah.
idea, but I bring all this up because I don't know if you can just cut out the sex addiction piece and then keep all the other ones.
No, no. It's like one of my guys that I worked with, he said, I really think through this. I'm not addicted to sex. I'm addicted to affirmation. I have an
Yes.
affirmation addiction. It's like,
Yes.
well, yeah, you do, but the going out and getting affirmation just to be affirmed isn't what has crushed your wife.
Correct.
It's that in that getting affirmed, you had sex with
Hmm.
however many other women and
Correct.
men. That's where the crushing is.
Yes.
So being able to realize part of that accountability piece, I've got the fantasy piece is as important for men to unpack together as the actual acting out. Because if we don't unpack our fantasies, it stays in our head and it grows and big and makes us really at risk then to act on it,
Hmm.
you know. And so, whatever we want to call it, affirmation addiction, sex addiction, okay, hyperactive, compulsive, whatever, those we things we want to stop, and we can't if we don't stop with that surrendering.
Yes.
And,
Correct.
and
And the reason I brought that up was you talked about the deception, and I think I don't know if you can drop the deceptive sexuality and heal your relationship with integrity, because I think the integrity issue, at least for high achievers, I think, and this is a great topic, Debbie, because I think when you go into the sex addiction world, and you go to 12 step, there is this over uh, there is this kind of obsession with, oh, you're doing this to regulate your emotions. Well, my guys are happy. They're fulfilled. And so when they hear this, like, oh, you feel worthless and you're regulating your emotions, they're kind of like, not so much. And then you go to 12 step and everybody's there feeling worthless and regulating emotions. And it's like, oh gosh, I'm not sure if I'm one of these guys. Well, you are, but in a different way, because they're using this brain process to get what they want, and you're really no different than them. Your processes are just different. And I think to me, I think that is the surrender is in order to live in integrity, you have to live in reality, and reality is not brain processes.
right, right. And how are you going to get out of that if you're not being accountable to other men?
Correct. Correct.
Right.
Or if you don't know. I mean, I think a lot of the men, when they come to my group, I think they don't really know that this is what's going on. I don't think they know their brain processes. Their perception, I'm kind of speaking for myself here. My perception was that I was killing it. I was crushing it. I was really good at doing life. And so I was like kind of annoyed by this sex addiction thing, because I'm like, okay, all right, I got to get this out because I don't want to lose my wife because she's everything to me. But I don't really want to change anything else. And I
Right.
think that was kind of the tough part, was I had to. And here's the other thing. I'd love for you to speak to this, because I know you have a lot of experience and thoughts and feelings and knowledge around the coupleship. I think the reason that this addiction is such a challenge, but also such a blessing, is your wife, it's really not as much about the sex as much as it's about, I want to be with somebody who's committed to reality. And I think that is why this recovery process is so big. Is it's not just stopping the behavior, because that's really not what she's concerned with. What she gets concerned with is the double life, the gaslighting, the deception, how easy it was for you. That's the scary part. I think a lot of people, men in my group, their spouse actually does think that they probably won't act out again. They actually think that, but they still haven't forgiven them, and they still haven't made the decision to stay in the marriage, because it's not really about that. It's about, man, am I safe to be with this person? Or are they always going to live a life with me and then a life for them? And that's that. To me, when you were saying that, can you have surrender with this deception? Can you have sobriety with this deception? Recovery with this deception? No, but I think it's bigger than just sexual sobriety. It is. It's a commitment to a single truth, and that's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. But and then that's why it interrupts intimacy. I
Yes.
think I'll speak on behalf of women, and maybe I don't speak for all of them, but we women, we desire to be known. I mean, we have to open ourselves up, and we want to be known, and we're hoping our spouse or significant other also wants to be known by us.
Yes.
I mean, like, that they're gonna fully be known. But see, if we're living in fantasy and we're still doing that deceptive thing, then you can't be fully known. You've gotta have this wall up that you can't know this. And women pick that up. They
Mhm.
know that something's there. They don't know what it is. And it may be, okay, I trust that he's really not acting out, but there's still something there. And that fantasy, that still needing the power, the still needing the affirmation. And I don't want to say it's that white knuckling that we're just not acting out. We're just, but when all the other things are still being processed and going on, a woman can feel that.
Mhm.
And then she feels, am I being duped again?
Mhm.
Can I even trust my own discernment? I mean, how stupid am I
Mhm.
to try to trust this again? And so the only way is, again, I think that for men to do really healthy intimacy with other men is where they get the experience and gain the strength. I- If I can do this with these men, I can do this with my significant
Mhm.
I can be known, you know? And when women choose to stay, they really are trusting he is going to become this man I
Mhm.
really believe him to be, you know? But it has to involve that surrender.
Mhm.
It'll
And
never
it's a that's why I call, like, our groups, I call 'em mastermind groups, because it's not that's kinda what we're doing. We're masterminding together with a bunch of like-minded men, and to your point, it's a if it can become cool, for lack of if the cool thing to do is to commit to a one single true reality, which is the goal of our recovery groups. Really, I mean, that's that ultimately the thing is, hey, we are we are driven high achievers. We have insane amounts of gifts. Man, imagine if we could stop wasting this on, I always look at it, it's like you're spraying it out in a bajillion different directions. It's like, that one of the gifts I think that this recovery gives people, men with this, especially high achieving men, is gosh, you get to focus. And I think so much of what they are hoping their career and income and all the other things they've done would do, recovery is one of those cool things. It's not a burden. I mean, it is, in my opinion, it is from our groups. It gives the men the thing that they were hoping for the entire time, and it was hard and elusive, and it was kind of never going to happen, which was kind of usually why the addiction actually gets worse. Is high achievers aren't stupid. When they know that their system is not going to yield the desired result, they're resourceful, and they will find a way to cope, compensate, whatever it is, affairs, anonymous partners, whatever their brain decides is the solution. And it's so funny, the sobriety and recovery sounds like such a burden in the beginning, but when you start to realize that a lot of this, especially for high achievers, has come from this knowing that you might not be 100% satisfied with the plan unless it's supplemented, to come back and channel all of that in a single few true directions. Um, and the irony too is they do typically triple or quadruple their income, because it's like, the one thing that everyone really wanted from them was a very human thing. And I think with addiction, we've stripped the humanity out of ourselves and turned ourselves into a machine that does brain processes. And it's not fun to be married to someone like that. It's not fun to be friends with someone like that. And if I have the option between two people, and I have this really impressive, perfect person, but I have this other person who's injecting a ton of humanity into it, the people pick the human person over and over. And so the
right.
irony of this all is, it's really what it's really what the some of the most fulfilled and successful people know how to do, which is, yes, play the game of capitalism, but also inject humanity back into yourself, therefore, so you can bring humanity back into your interactions. Because I think when we turn ourselves into a machine that does, a doing machine. What we don't realize is when you're not human, it allows you to dehumanize everyone else. And that's, we like to think that we're only doing it to ourselves. Unfortunately, that's not how it works.
Right, right. So I think that's why when we talk about surrender, can I surrender my need for power and affirmation? Because as long
Mhm.
as me being the most powerful in the room, the most affirmed, the most respected, as long as I'm going for that chase, I don't have freedom.
Mhm.
I'm in bondage and almost enslaved to that need for more power and more freedom. I'm sorry,
Mhm.
affirmation.
Mhm.
It's only when that's surrendered, as you just talked about, that I can have some freedom in this.
Mhm.
I mean, the men that I've worked with along the way, some of the smartest, most charismatic, have been gifted with incredible talents, have been gifted with amazing personality that bring people in and are approachable, almost like everything they touch is gold. It's
Mhm.
like, just look at what you've been gifted with. Use it in a way of what you're gifted. Steward that giftedness
Mhm.
well, but respect people and be honest with your
Yes.
spouse along the way and just live out in a freedom of your giftedness. And I
Yes.
think if we are living out our freedom and our giftedness, we may be the most affirmed in the room, but not because we were chasing for the affirmation.
Yes. Yes. Well, I think again, that's why I love the word brain process addiction, because it's like you're saying, if your priority is to exercise these beliefs that you have, my goal today is to get as many of these as I can. Um, think about how disruptive that is to life,
Mhm.
and how unlife that is to life. Because that, and that's just one thought process. So let's call that affirmation and attention. That's just one. And
Mhm.
then if you have, oh, I want to make sure that, and when I have any interaction, that I'm always here and they're always here, which a lot of people think, oh, I don't think that. Well, think again. You might, people are sizing people up a lot more, and that's another one. So that's two brain processes. And then how many more do we have like that? Do you have some that are financial? Do you have some that are materialistic? And the more and more and more of those we throw on there, it's just kind of an analogy for a minute. Kind of another way to look at what you just said. That's the opposite of surrender. So I think what I heard you say there was surrender is not just a buzzword. What we're talking about is it's a commitment to dropping. Again, I'll let you redefine it if I'm screwing it up. But what I heard with that last statement was, um, each one of those is harming surrender, because that's not surrender. It is you saying, I I will not feel good at the end of the day if I don't believe this and exercise my abilities to get as much of it as I can. And then the more and more you stack of that, that, at least from what I heard you say, that's the opposite of surrender, because now it's like, okay, well, I'll surrender with whatever time I have left, but I need to get these things done. And I'm not open to, I guess here's the anti-surrender piece. I'm really not open to having a day not full of a bunch of validation and affirmation and attention. I don't like the idea of that day. And I think that's that point is, okay, well, if you're not going to give that one up, and that's your biggest one, then really all you have left to give people is 80% of you, 70% of you, whatever remains outside of that. And then here, I think this is the point, and this is where sex addiction comes in, is when you are actually faced with a decision where you have to pick, which one do you choose? And regrettably, just to be vulnerable here with my own, um, I did not choose my wife every time. And she even said to me once, Debbie, she said, it broke my heart. She said, I don't feel like you're a priority. She's like, sometimes I do, but there's times where I don't. And it always hurt me when she said that. And I dismissed her because I was like, oh, you're crazy. You're my priority. But you know what I realized in my recovery? Those moments that she said that to me, she actually was picking up on something that, and she was right. It was usually when I was like at business conferences, or if I was speaking on stage, I was very into those brain processes, and they were a priority over her. And I was in denial about that then. Now I know she's right.
Right, right. I've heard men describe, when I'd go places, I needed to be and kind of considered myself the smartest
Mhm.
in the room, and kind of above, but would keep the distance because I was fearful that they would discover that I really
Mhm.
was. And so even we think of that with our spouses of I need you to see me as this. And if I surrender that, you might not. But
Mhm.
recognizing that in that surrendering is, like your wife was asking, I just need to know you would put me above your need to
Mhm.
have all of that, you know. And cool that you have that insight and can recognize what
Yeah,
that's.
better late than never, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think what we're talking about here, just to because I know this is another sensitive topic for a lot of the men, is they don't really resonate with this word childhood trauma because it's like, oh, I wasn't abused, I wasn't, all the typical stuff. I had nothing bad happen to
Mhm.
me. I wasn't molested. All these things. So it's like, oh, when I hear the word childhood trauma, they're like, oh, that doesn't apply to me. But what we're talking about is because the reason, another way of saying what you just said, the reason that we have such a difficulty with the idea of living in a world without nonstop affirmation, attention, being desired and lusted after, the the success, the opportunities, the excitement, the peak experiences, the travel, the buying new things and getting affirmation for the thing that you bought. The reason that we don't like a life without that is because we remember what life was like without it, and our perception is that I don't want to be a guy who didn't have this. We think about, oh my gosh, when I was 21 and I was just out of college and I was poor and I didn't have any of this, I felt so small. And I don't want to go to that. Guys, I know a lot of you feel like you don't have childhood trauma. That right there is childhood trauma. When you are like, I would rather exercise all of these brain processes than go back to how I felt when I was 21 and
Right.
insignificant. The real question would be, were you ever insignificant when you were 21 if you were capable of becoming this guy now? Why did you have no value then and you have value now, when the only difference, that's childhood trauma, is your resting
Mhm.
state without your process addiction
Mhm.
is uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And that's, to me, that's the benefit of surrendering, is without it, we don't see how uncomfortable we are without these things. And then therefore you're kind of stuck. I mean, you can't really do anything if you think you know better than your therapist. How are you supposed to change?
Right. Well, one of the things that I require of all the individuals I work with, the addicts, and I do it with the spouses too. I do a family of origin slash sexual
Hmm.
history that I literally have you timeline your life and you come in and we walk through that timeline together. And I want to know, ages 0 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15. And I want to know what you were experiencing with your family, but I also want to know what were the sexual messages, what were the messages about self, what were your
Hmm.
interactions like. And we looked at, and it's amazing what what men will discover, you know because most men aren't going to sit and do that unless they're asked to, you know and what they discover in the messages that were made along the way, the beliefs that they begin believing based on the messages, and then the
Hmm.
core vows they made. And many men will have that core vow: I
Hmm.
will never feel this is insignificant again. I'll never be in this. I mean, that make that core vow.
Hmm.
And then that become we become guided kind of by our core
Yeah,
values.
more important than it becomes more important. I know it sounds insane, but it becomes more important than the truth, which is insane. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just crazy to think about.
yeah. Because then we almost feel like we're betraying ourselves if we go
Mhm,
against our core vow.
mhm,
I'm not certainly not gonna betray myself.
mhm,
And then I've also found when you say trauma,
mhm.
you know, a lot of things that I do believe are trauma, men won't consider as trauma.
Yep.
I mean, men that I've worked with that, 15, 16, that they were managing the surf shop and the 25-year-old, 30-year-old manager, seduced them. What 15-year-old kid doesn't think it's great to have sex
Mhm.
with a 25-year-old woman? You know, but a 25-year-old having sex with a 15-year-old's, you know, kind of against the law.
Mm. Yeah.
And men look at back that and go, "Whoa." And then what the
Mhm.
messages are that come with that. So I think we also wanna be careful of just going, "Oh, no, there isn't any trauma." Are you willing to look
Mhm.
at your life? Because what impact did that make? What did
Mhm.
you believe about women? What did you believe about success? What did that believe make you think of self? What did it
'Cause
make
that's
you
the
think of?
trauma I think from the high achiever is, right in the second chapter of my book, that's what I say. I said, "Listen," I said, "the high achievers, their biggest offender is them. You were the one who tormented yourself. You were the one that said, 'We are gonna do this forever, and we're gonna do this as much as we can, and we're not gonna stop.' Because the more if we do this and we keep our foot on the gas with this, then the chances of this ever happening will be 0." Can you imagine saying that though to your 11-year-old? Can you say, "Hey, um, I'll tell you what they come in, they're crying, 'Oh, dad, this happened.'" Can you imagine saying to your son or your daughter, "Okay, well, from this day forward, this is what you're gonna do. I don't want you to feel I want you to keep your head down, and I want you to constantly diet, do sit-ups, push-ups, pull-ups, eat protein." Like, if you could, can you imagine saying that to your kid? I want you to basically, in every spare second, enhance your physical appearance so that this never happens to you. You would never say that to your kid.
Yeah, right.
But this is what we do to us, and I think that's I think why everyone calls it as, "Oh, I never was traumatized." And it's because, yeah, okay, maybe the thing itself didn't feel traumatizing, but the conclusions were. And
The
and
likely
imagine how many of those you draw. 100,000 conclusions, 1,000,000 conclusions, 2,000,000 conclusions. I mean, gosh, by the time you're 22, you're so caught up in conclusions, brain process addiction, that you're not alive. And then we look back and it's like, well, then your wife asks you, well, how could you do this? And you don't really have an answer. That's why, because you're 2,000,000 brain processes deep
Mhm.
that you can't even make sense of it yourself. And that's back to your point. That's why groups are so beneficial, because I think when you sit down and you're like, "Oh, I don't know what happened from 0 to 4 or why that matters. I don't know what happened from 6 to 12 or why that matters." But then you watch another man in the group draw a conclusion from a situation that you were now a observer watching, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, why'd you conclude that? That's so stupid." And then you watch the next guy do something the same, and then the next guy, and then you start to ask yourself, and this is where agree with you. I think surrender, especially of high achievers, sometimes you have to be in a group of high achievers, because it's like, wow, if the other 9 men in my group drew such stupid conclusions that completely altered the course of their life, why am I the only one of the 10 that didn't?
Right.
And that's where it's like they start to surrender and understand, okay, shoot, maybe I'm not special after all. Maybe there are conclusions. And then that's to me, that's when the surrender, at least for me, that's when the surrender started, was when I saw a bunch of like-minded guys that I respected taking ownership over a delusional way of living. It was like, maybe I should look into that too.
Yeah, yeah. From, 2012 no, 2009 until 2017, I would co-facilitate men's sexual integrity groups with another male colleague. And when I started the groups, I couldn't get any male therapists to start a men's group. They're like, "Debbie, that people aren't gonna come and talk about that." It's like, "I'm working with enough men. I think they will." I think they will. And you know what I learned through those years, I mean, the finding safety in men being trusted to by other men, because so much of now where they are, they're not being trusted by their spouses, or if they've
Mhm.
lost their jobs or thing, but to set in with another man and reestablishing what it feels like to be trusted. And then what it feels like of, I'm gonna confront you on your BS,
Mhm.
because I think that's what we've got going on, that men are able to do that and help hold each other accountable.
Mhm.
And in that, just to see the surrender that would begin to take place,
Mhm.
the beginning of the group to the end, and then many of them would re-up for the next 12 sessions,
Mhm.
but that it takes that from other men confronting one another out of care and concern.
Yes.
I think respect, and
Mhm.
then being respected again, I think is just so powerful.
Oh, yeah,
What
especially
happened?
in this situation. Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Having, because a lot of these containers, Debbie, like you're saying, it's the one place where all that's gone because everybody there is in the same spot, and so it's like, you're no longer hiding anything because it's like, oh, yep, I did this and this and this and this is where we are, and then the other guy did something similar. The other guy, so finally, we're back to being equal, which
Yeah.
is so nice because I think the challenge with this is it's such a one down position,
Mhm.
gosh, which is just not a healing environment for somebody struggling with process addiction. I mean, the last thing you would do to an addict is put them in an awful situation where they feel like they have messed up, like they're less than, like they're not
Mhm.
loved anymore, like their wife's going to leave them. And unfortunately, with this, part of the challenge with this is that is a lot of what, for good reasoning, that is a lot of what happens is you're put into that position, and it's really tough because recovery can't happen there. Recovery happens back when your dignity's back and you're an equal and a human. But man, you have to, in this particular addiction, well, all addictions, but especially with this one, you do really have to take initiative in putting yourself in those positions because it's not going to happen to you. You're not going to just be in this beautiful environment where that can happen. And that's really sad because I see a lot of divorces happen
Mhm.
that probably shouldn't have happened had the male, the addict, done a little bit more to create that environment because yeah, they eventually quit and they blame whatever, the world, their parents, their spouse, the situation. um, but it's like, man, down here it's easy to blame that, but if you could have put yourself into a place where you were a human being and you were able to change, the outcome might have been different.
Right, right. And I think that surrendering, the power is really, really important because I know that men feel powerless to be able to make their wives heal quicker, get to a better place, well, just get over it, get out of the past and let's face they're powerless to make you look future, But the other part of that is they are empowered to create a safe environment.
Hmm.
And it's that they have such empowerment to create a safe environment for my wife, and I'm going to begin by being honest.
Hmm.
I'm going to work at being trustworthy, and that's why that surrendering, giving up deception or any form of gaslighting.
Hmm.
And I realize men have gaslit for so long that they sometimes it takes a while to recognize when they're doing it.
Hmm.
You know, but as long as that crazy making's going on, it won't feel safe for the
Right.
wife. And so when that surrendering is I'm surrendered to creating a safe environment for you, then that's when real healing and that intimacy with the spouse really takes place.
And speaking of environments, both you and I create environments for people. Mine is in Sedona, Arizona, for small groups of 10 men who are high achievers, entrepreneurs, executives. Um, Yours is exciting and relative, well, not new work to you because you've been doing it, but a new super container that you're trying to create that's even more superior and more special to the things you've done in your rest of your career. Can you share with people what you're building and creating for people and who it's for?
Absolutely. So we've moved to Stevensville, Montana, and have created the space and have the accessibility that I can do marital intimacy, uh, it, group experiences, having 6 couples come at a time. And all the couples that are coming, it is focusing on deepening the sexual intimacy. All the couples have been on a recovery journey for sexual addiction and betrayal, and they are finally at the place of wanting to deepen that intimacy with their spouse. Then also do intensives for couples who've been on a sexual pain journey, which is not what this podcast is about, but I do those for the couples, and then also have the setup for couples to come if they're like, oh, we're not ready for a group
Hmm.
experience yet, but we want to come and work. And in about 5 days, we can get 15 to 20 hours of therapy in a week, and everybody, it's quiet. It's getting away from the busyness. It's
Hmm.
getting in touch with nature. Just the scenery is beautiful. The stars at night. So just really being able to be in a place of slowing the mind
Hmm.
down and kind of disconnecting from all those external forces.
Hmm. Oh
And
yeah,
that,
and people don't honor that enough. I think changing your physical environment. I I wish people talked about it more because I think back to all of my most profound business breakthroughs, all my most profound teachings and learnings. It was all when I wrote the check, swiped the card, booked the flight, and made a real commitment, multi-day commitment to changing. And I think that's just really, really hard when you get in your same old car, drive back to your same old house or your same old job. I think it's very hard to, especially for the addict, to compartmentalize therapy and then life. Whereas when you go to a on-site experience, I think that whole split goes away and it's like, oh my gosh, it's forced surrender. I have made a financial commitment, a mental commitment, and a commitment to myself and or my partner. Um, I'm going to go do this. I'm taking time off of, I mean, it's very intentional. And I think that intentionality closes that split. And so I just wanted to say that for everybody listening, I know some people hear it and like, oh, that sounds like a lot of work. The power of it is underestimated in my opinion.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it is a lot of work. I mean, I will validate. I think life is a lot of work. I mean, you don't want to sit across from the person that goes, "Yeah, I think I've done it all, and I don't need to work at me anymore." I don't need to work on this relationship anymore.
Yeah, but what's more of an inconvenience, flying to Stevenson, Montana, or sitting across the table from a damaged relationship for an hour to 2 hours a day, over and over and over, not looking forward to coming home, not looking forward to sleeping separate. It's like, to me, I'm a huge condensed results guy, and I know there's a lot of therapists like, oh, you can't condense results. And I agree with that to some degree. But what I do think that the on site experience away from home does is it closes that split that our brains are able to do of, oh, well, this is therapy and he's just saying this for here. And, oh, when you go and intentionally make a plan to do this, and I'm saying, there's a lot of people listening who have done this and would agree with me. And there's a lot of people who haven't done this who are wondering like, oh, is that really that necessary? I wouldn't necessarily say it's necessary, but I would say, man, if you really want to mess with the brain and create massive change, I personally believe you've got to get out of your comfortable environment and make a commitment. And I know that this sounds funny too, but we live in a capitalist society. I think making the financial commitment, I know it seems kind of like silly, but I think it has a decent amount of psychology too. My wife and I did a intensive that was $24,000, and I don't know if it was actually the best intensive or if it was the fact that I paid $24,000 and the placebo effect, but it was the best intensive we did. And it could have been the best. It also could have been, but it's a lot of these very intentional things
Sure.
that do something to the brain. And so anyways, for everybody listening, these things work. And I know Debby and I wouldn't do it if they didn't work, and we wouldn't force you to. If we could do it on Zoom, we would do it on Zoom.
Yeah,
But there's just some things that can't be done online.
absolutely. Yeah.
Debby, where can they find more information? What's the best way right now for them to reach out to you to explore something like this?
My website is debbywade.com. It's DebbywAde.
Mhm.
And I would just say, I've been a marriage and family therapist, licensed 30 years ago, actually 32 years ago now, and have been a certified sex therapist since 2008. And what I can't promise it for everybody, but what I've experienced on this journey of working with couples in recovery is that getting to that point, they have a deeper
Yeah.
capacity
Yes.
for bringing in a deeper intimacy than some couples will ever know.
Yes.
'Cause literally, they could describe, "We've been to hell and back, and we've experienced what a hellish marriage
Mhm.
looks like, and we're ready to experience more like what a heavenly marriage
Mhm.
would look like."
And
And
I think too, to that point, for everyone who's kind of like given up hope, um, man, I have just seen that turn around for so many people. And it really, it's funny, you hear the statistics, and sometimes you hear like, oh, it's how could you ever recover from this? But then you hear that other statistic, which I'm sure you've heard, that says 86% of couples who do the work actually bounce back from this. And, is that skewed because all the quitters just quit? Okay, maybe it is skewed, but regardless, the point is, when I hear that number, not only have I seen that number be true, but it's pretty incredible when you make a commitment to getting to the bottom of this. And again, we're not going to force you to stay together. Whatever you guys decide is right for you is right for you. But man, it's so funny when two humans commit
yeah,
to doing the work together, to doing the work independently. It's actually quite miraculous,
right,
the people who come together. So yeah, for those who've lost hope, don't, and
right.
then and reach out to Debbie. And if you guys don't want to reach out to Debbie, reach out to me. We can have a conversation, and I can point you in the whatever right direction that you need to be pointed to there. But the most important thing is that you get the help, and that you don't wait. I see so many people wait, and it just kills me, Debbie, when they wait, because it's like the waiting itself is harmful. And pulling the trigger now is always the best way. Debbie, do you have any other resources that somebody can look at that you have available for somebody to get to know you better?
As far as just reaching out
Mhm.
to me, there
Mhm.
help at debbywade.com.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, that's not right either. Help at debbie4acts.com.
Yes.
I'll make sure you have that.
Yep.
Just to other resources. I mean, I am, if you needed a list, what are the books that I recommend for intimacy, for recovery, for women, for men? I'll email you a reading list,
Mhm.
Roland, so you have it that you
Yeah,
can
please.
share, because I know that reading doesn't fix us,
Mhm.
but having that knowledge, and then podcasts, and
Yeah.
you do your podcast for a
Mhm.
reason, and you know that people have some time to join in like this, don't have time for reading. So,
Mhm.
but I'll give you a list of some of my favorites
Yeah,
podcasts.
yeah. Anybody can send you an email, and if not, send me an email, and I'll put you in contact with Debbie. Debbie, thank you so much for this conversation today. This was amazing. It was super helpful, refreshing topic that I think is really hard to wrap our heads around. And I think you did a really darn good job. And I think you helped a lot of people today. So thank you so much.